Being such an animation fan can be hard sometimes, and I don't mean hard like trying to get more than 2 videos out in a year, but it can be difficult sometimes when you're trying to have an intelligent conversation with somebody while you just loved a piece of animation, and then you get a response like, yeah, that was a cute cartoon, and then you have to explain to the person why you don't want to be working together anymore, and I think that comes from the stigma surrounding animation that it's just for kids. And while I will gladly sit you down for a lecture about why the Vampire Lady song about french fries sung to the giant monster is really deep and you just don't understand yet, it's not really like there's an alternative in the medium. I mean, yeah, I could sit a friend down and watch the latest episode of Mr. Pickles, but
Do I wish Miss Goodman would buy that shaker baby for $2? No, it really works, because I was wishing you would buy it for $3, Miss Goodman.
The foolishness of that comment is so deep, I can only ascribe it to higher education.
Adult animation, as it stands now, is kind of embarrassing. And that's not to say that it's always been bad or even that it's all bad, but the fact that a show like Rick and Morty, for example, has become hugely popular in the past few years for doing things that a lot of kids' cartoons have been doing already, kind of proves how much adult animation in general has been dropping the ball. Of course, I'm talking about adult animation in very broad terms here, but we're living in a time where it's not only rare to get adult animation in theaters, but it's also really a bad thing. It honestly feels like opposite day, because a lot of the time the kids' table is the one having a serious conversation about racism and trauma, and meanwhile the adults are talking about how XD it would be if the hot dog said he wants some bun, and you know what that means, guys. Oh boy, $20 million, ooh boy.
Look at these big old buns. Yeah! You know it, baby! Work those buns!
You have to have gone to college to say something that stupid.
In order to fully understand adult animation now, I think it's important that we go all the way back to the 1950s era of animation. 1950s animation went something like this.
Why, of course, Ripcord. This was the site of that famous air race that was so controversial 30 years ago. But right after that...
Yep.
Back then, companies in the industry either put all of their resources into the writing department or just straight up didn't have any resources, because nobody wanted to invest in a costly medium like animation when you can do the exact same thing or something very similar in live action, not to mention for severely less cost. And nobody wanted to push the medium of animation to show how much potential it has because they didn't have the money to risk. Companies began to notice and begin using practices like reusing as much animation as possible, using the highest numbers of animation possible, and generally not fighting the constraints put on them, but instead working with them.
Why is it so successful? Basically, I think a novelty look, cave people doing situation comedy, and good stories. That's what I think.
Hanna-Barbera was really the company to thrive in this kind of environment. Their plan essentially being to pump out whatever was seemingly ready, but to gear it towards children. The one demographic that isn't going to complain about a lack of quality, as they don't know if there is any. You can't really say something is poorly or choppily animated if you haven't been exposed to anything that wasn't, or just straight up can't talk. I certainly know I watched a bunch of dumb stuff as a kid, but you can see me in a high chair complaining about the screenplay to Shark Boy and Lava Girl. Nah, I wait till I was much older to do that.
I'm feeling a strong 7 to a light 8.
Hit the hay, fast asleep, dream a dreamy little bleep. Dream, 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 dream.
Congratulations.
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 Congratulations. Thank you all.
This corner-cutting course was what eventually led into the 1970s age of animation, where companies either A, stuck to the same tactics, B, ripped off Hanna-Barbera, C, you were Hanna-Barbera, in which case you ripped off Hanna-Barbera, or D, found anything that was vaguely recognizable to make an animated version of, leading to everybody's favorite, Goober and the Ghost Chasers, the Jackson 5.
You see, you know it's cool because I have 5 instead of...
The Super Globetrotters, Josie and the Pussycats. Nah, don't like that? Throw them in space, see if I care. I Am the Greatest, The Adventures of Muhammad Ali. Or what about the American classic that is Fonz and the Happy Days Gang?
Oh, now the gang got
While I was working for all the crummy studios in LA in the 80s, doing shows that I hated and that everyone that worked on hated, I kept having this dream that someday I would sell something of my own, which was insane at the time. Animation wasn't done like that in the 1970s and the 1980s. They just had the weirdest way of going about deciding what to make a cartoon about. One way was a toy company would say, we're making this ugly toy here, and you have to make a cartoon series about it. But that was the environment that I still believe I'm going to sell my weird ideas.
The 90s, with its creator-based cartoons, was kind of a renaissance for TV animation. This is a time where the original Nicktoons and cartoons were just kind of the norm. And while there is a laundry list of reasons why the 2000s is terrible for animation, the 2010s has gone back to the motto of the 90s, allowing animators to really tell the stories they want to tell. Now, something that's very important about this little history lesson is the fact that since the 60s, I haven't mentioned age demographic once. Instead, the industry has more or less been perfecting making entertainment that's child-friendly. This is where adult cartoons begin to be a problem.
All kids out of the pool for Adult Swim. All kids out.
Even when TV animation started shifting more towards making adult-oriented programming, it still tried maintaining that crude and silly style of all the previous years of animation. I mean, it was still stupid, it was still childish, but surprisingly enough, it was also still good. In fact, this is what makes the early era of Adult Swim so interesting. The envelope was certainly being pushed. I mean, it was groundbreaking at the time to see so much adult animation in one block. We had rarely, if ever, seen adult animation, period, before then, but we'll get to that, wink wink. However, looking back, the block also is incredibly tame compared to what's on TV nowadays. A lot of the shows that were at Adult Swim's premiere would probably make it on Cartoon Network. In fact, shows like Space Ghost originally were on Cartoon Network and then moved to Adult Swim, leading to a very lose-win scenario as, yes, you are getting more content for a more mature audience, but you're also getting a lot of content that doesn't properly use its audience. This is even a problem now, as there are only a handful of shows in the past decade that I would really describe as adult. And yeah, I know that not every show needs to be tackling hard-hitting issues in order to be considered adult, but it's also important to look at issues like Problem Solvers, preferably in sepia. Obviously, with the show's early internet-inspired style, it was gearing itself for a more mature audience, and yet when pitched to Adult Swim, it was moved to Cartoon Network for being too mind-blowingly cute for the block. So really what I'm trying to wrap my head around is that there is such a thing as not adult enough for the genre, but personally, I fail to see how Bloody Satirical Comedy 2018 proved itself to be more mature than a concept that could have been great had it had the right audience. Dear adult animation, why is everything you do a comedy? Why do you think knowing what a sex is automatically makes you funny? Why is everything you make so bad? The straw that broke the camel's back for me was Comedy Central's Jeff and Some Aliens. After Comedy Central released a couple shows that I would say existed, I didn't really have any high hopes for this. I basically just saw a few ads for it and thought, oh, we're still trying to be South Park? Alright. To be honest, I actually forgot that the show existed until I was researching for this video, where I read all 3 of its Metacritic reviews and found out that there was once a great show known as Aqua Teen Hunger Force. This newbie isn't quite there, but it's close enough. That's a compliment, I think. I'll get back to you on that. Truth be told, I actually got so bored during the first episode that I made a game that's way too entertaining to me. Ladies and gems, welcome to Adult Animation Bingo! Lack of any expression, suburban setting, flash animation, average show main character, that's Frank, social commentary, that's most of the screenplay, let's be real. It's not okay that the most interesting part of this episode is my tea. Right, sexual innuendo, yes. Spelling it out for the audience, yes. Excessive blood and violence, yes. Gross out, yes. There's like half the episode left, what? Oh, is this when it's gonna zoom in on him while he's giving a speech? Heck yeah, it is, woo! How can nobody else see Firewater right now? Racist joke, that's like most of the script. How many times can I check off social commentary? 10 out of 10 show, guys. I filled out the entire card. The issue with adult animation actually got perfectly summarized for me on a bus trip of all things. I was sitting there staring out the window, using conversations around me as a podcast, trying to ignore the people in the back of the bus playing an XXXTentacion album, when I heard one of them say to their friend that when they were younger, all they had to do was just say the word poop and everybody would laugh. And now that they're older, all they need to do is say the F word or any number of curses, and 9 times out of 10 they'll get the same result. Which is not only the most intelligent thing I think I will ever hear on public transportation, animation, but also perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with the genre since Family Guy.
You've got mail.
Dear ANK, you're thinking about it too hard. Don't do that, you're gonna hurt yourself. If you need somebody to blame, then blame The Simpsons. Sincerely, Adult Animation PS. Enjoy the copyright strike coming your way. The Simpsons was the risk the industry needed to take in order to be seen as adult, being the first time adult animation was even attempted since 1987's Stevie and Zoya, or as it's known in France, Miraculous Ladybug. The Simpsons became an utter phenomenon that's still going to this day, and yet it's also the death nail for all of its contemporaries. Not really, but I want to be dramatic. Ever since its premiere, everybody wanted to be the next Simpsons, so it only really makes sense for a show like Family Guy to become the next craze, even if it did take a while for that craze status to really kick in. Because when you break it down, Family Guy is just The Simpsons, but a lot ruder and edgier and more "you can't do that on television," a sentiment that was already in vogue due to the recent airing of South Park. And after those two shows premiere, I mean the race was on to become the next South Park or Family Guy, essentially putting the industry back where it started, stagnant. Except now it's more of a quality stagnation, as we essentially get another raunchy sitcom coming out every other year and ironically being replaced with South Park or Family Guy reruns after just a season. A barely recognized flop like Jeff and Some Aliens wasn't just a fluke, it's the norm. Even BoJack Horseman was almost ruined by its marketing for me. Being presented as another raunchy sitcom, but this time it's got hashtags and is hip and cool with the youth, I mean adults. It got to the point where the only reason I actually watched it was ironically. Not because I thought the show was good and I wanted to laugh with it, but because I thought it looked so bad that it was a joke I wanted to laugh at. Because quite honestly, at this point, that's what adult animation has become. A joke where the punchline every time is a ham sandwich budget and hoping you say enough naughty words to garner a second season. It's telling to me that out of all the currently announced shows, there are only a handful that I'm actually looking forward to, and even then, I don't really care about the shows themselves, but more so the people behind them. Like, the jellies look like the most unappealing thing ever until I listened to Flower Boy, and now I just don't know whether to cut this part of the script. While this video can be seen as quite negative, it's not really intended that way. It's more so something I've made out of a place of caring. Cause I want nothing more than this industry to be taken more seriously, but I also know that that's not achievable if we treat the ability to curse or make a sex joke as us being serious.
Look at these big old birds.
The reason I say this creative stagnation is killing adult animation is because every time we move past it, we show more and more of a pulse. Or, you know, we could just give Family Guy 15th season, cause whoo boy!